Welcome to the Dangerous Man Podcast, where we talk about how to become a better man, take responsibility for our mission, create value for others, and the many failures and lessons we've learned along the way. Stay dangerous. Welcome back to the Dangerous Man Podcast. This is your host, John Kostohris, joined by your co-host,
Adam Thooft. What's up, boys?
What is up, guys? Today, we are going to talk, Adam and I, we are. And, we were kind of hoping to get into the topic of overcoming character flaws. What does that mean? Interesting question, John, that you should ask that. What does it mean? We're actually going to share our stories a little bit. Adam and I both have a little piece of a story that we want to share, a moment from us and our becoming and our growing up a little bit more from a few years ago. Mine will be back towards my childhood. Adam's will be a little bit more recently. You say 3 or 4 years ago?
More recently than childhood, but kind of right after high school, kind of.
Okay. Yes. Perfect. So that's kind of what we're looking at today. I'm going to jump right in here and share my thoughts. So the context here is that when I was a kid, I was homeschooled. And we're talking like preschool, kindergarten through 3rd grade right now. I pretty much did not do my homework. I did not listen to my mom very well. And I just was a bad kid at home. And what was interesting about that is my mom always threatened, hey, if you don't get your act together, John, if you don't do your homework. I also just complained a ton. I was like, I'm not going to do it. This is hard. And
I'm going to run away and play.
Yeah. I did. Yeah. And it was I remember in 3rd grade, me and my dad sitting it was the coffee table in the living room. And he's basically trying to help get me to do this homework and help me, but I was refusing his help and just melting down this is too hard. Arithmetic, by the way, for those wondering. And at any rate, my mom always threatened to send me to school if I didn't get my act together and behave. And well, you guessed it, I did not. And they sent me to school starting in 4th grade. And kind of the story there was because I was so resistant to reading and writing that I basically, I sucked at reading and writing because I refused to learn and practice that. And in school, I was immediately thrown into special ed and kind of had to go to those periods of special ed and kind of have, I don't know, we basically had to do some extra tests and they had quote unquote resources for us to kind of help us in our learning disabilities, if you will. And I kind of unofficially was categorized as having ADD, which is basically, I guess, what they would call attention deficit disorder.
What do you mean by unofficially?
Yeah, so I was never brought into a doctor and they never spoke this over me you have ADD. But my mom was pretty much I think it's hard for you to focus and this would be something similar, So at any rate, the important part is that I was in special ed and I didn't really know how to read and write. And I basically had to have a teacher one of these special ed teachers sit in classes with me and take notes from me, which was actually kind of nice.
They're definitely holding your hand, but it is kind of nice.
For a little bit, I was I don't have to do all this shit that I hate.
What's amazing?
Because I was slow at writing and I legitimately would put hyphens in between every word. And I just was terrible and I was slow. And at any rate, so I was kind of behind in school getting into school and I needed all this attention and help. But I remember just hating special ed because I had to sit on an extra class periods and I had to do all these extra tests every quarter or semester or, whatever it is. And essentially, I was I want out. I don't want to have to do all this stuff. Basically I got to the point where I wasn't really needing their help. I wasn't going to any of the special ed stuff. And I had.
So you stopped putting hyphens between all your words.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And they're like, okay, you're good. No, it was, I stopped putting hyphens in between my words and I started actually, I was basically improving drastically and learning how to read and write. And I could keep up in a class And, technically they're like, they gave me the option of like, if you want to take your, tests in a different room, we could arrange that outside of your classes if it helps you focus more. And I remember just being like, no, I don't want that. Like, I want to do what everyone else is doing. I want to be like everyone else. And so I kind of fought hard for that. And even if I struggle at times focusing, I really like, I just wanted to be a normal, regular student and not need to be in these special ed things because I didn't feel like I needed it. I was like, therefore, I don't want to be like thrown in with all these people that are all these losers that can't focus.
Yeah.
I didn't really think they were losers, but you get what I'm saying though. I was just like, I don't want to associate with them. I'm just
Mhm.
normal and I can perform. And so basically, long story short, I ended up testing out of special ed. And kind of the quick breakdown with that is that I took this test to test out of needing special ed, and a um I had a what would you call it? I guess the head of the region of schools, whatever like school system we are in or whatever you'd call it. And they basically, after I did well in this test and tested out officially of needing special ed, like, oh, I had broken out of the box they had put around you know, um needing all this extra help and whatnot, and I was kind of a normal kid. And
Mhm.
this guy came, and my parents were there. And this is eighth grade, by the way. So I loosely was in special ed for a few years. Really, after fourth grade was the main year, and here I am.
So for 3 years?
Yeah, more or
Okay.
less. Here getting into eighth grade, and I officially was like, I'm testing out of this. It could have even been seventh grade, somewhere around there.
Mhm.
Either way,
So you were in special ed for 3 to 4 years?
yep,
Okay.
yep. And I took this test, and I did really well, of course, because I didn't really need it. And I ended up having this high guy come, and not high guy. He was not high, but he was
I sure hope not.
wasted. No. Anyways, this guy from the school system came, and right, my parents were there, setting a scene. We're just in the classroom. It wasn't like anything huge, but then I remember like there was a couple of teachers there, and then basically they're like, "Hey, like less than 1% of people in your group of special edness like test out or ever like kind of quote unquote graduate needing this help.
Wow.
It's very rare." I was like, "Oh," my reaction was like, "Oh." It didn't really matter to me. Like I didn't really care, but I was like, "Oh, interesting." Oh, okay. Like in my mind, I never was one of them, so I was like, "Okay, whatever."
I'm
But
special.
they made yeah, they made a big deal about it, and they shook my hand and gave me like a certificate, and they're like, "We want to recognize you, as somebody." Anyways, it was pretty interesting, but um, kind of the main point though, that I'm getting at though is, I didn't do my homework. I I had a deficit in my character of like refusing to do what I was supposed to do, refusing to do my work, and also just like not having skills like reading and writing because I refused to just actually do what I was told and embrace what I did. But for me, that's a story of getting tossed into like, oh, you're special ed and you have ADD, and there is a little bit of like labeling that goes on there. And for me, it's substantial because there's a lot of people that sit there and they're like, oh, I have this learning deficit, um, and they kind of live out of that identity with that. Um, and for me, it was like, I that's not the kind of person I want to be, and I don't really feel like I have a learning disability. Like I am a cool kid. Actually, I hang with the cool kids. I'm not some there's some person that struggles with all these things. Like that's not me. And I really made that a goal to push out of that and grow. Um, and for me, there's a certain kind of mindset that I think I could fall into. Like it's nice having notes taken for me, like, and whatnot. But
I guess this is just the way I am. Is that kind of like the thing that okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's kind of my story, and kind of a way that I had some character flaws that I overcame
Mhm.
in my life. And yeah.
So were you talking about kind of the character flaws being like the I'm way behind in like reading and writing, like the dashes between the words, that kind of thing? Is that kind of more the like, hey, I was behind just because I didn't want to do what my parents told me and I wasn't actually disciplined. And then I got these labels slapped on me and then like put into this program. But then like was it what was the synthesis for changing? Was it just the hey, I don't want to be here, or like I just have to do extra work because of this, or like a combination of those things.
Yeah, I think it was the I don't want to do this extra special ed work and, the
Hmm.
labels that comes with that,
Yeah.
Part of it was as simple as like, I don't want to have to take these stupid tests every year additionally to the other testing I'm doing because
Yeah.
I'm in my head, I'm already normal. So I was like, well, fuck this. Give me the test. I'm going to test out of this shit. And then I
Yeah.
did.
So is mostly, I mean, you weren't necessarily saying that as like a seventh grader, but
No, no, that's how I talk about it now.
yeah, it's like, I don't think we swore very much when we were,
Yeah, I did.
but, uh, so it was almost like you didn't want to identify with that.
Yeah.
And, you'd actually like, your character has gotten better. You'd gotten better at reading, writing, math. Um, and you didn't want to take the extra tests. So I was like, well, screw this. Get me out of this thing. Is that kind of like the way in which you grew was just being like realizing, hey, this is not who I have to be. And it's annoying that I have to do this other stuff. So let's actually like move and get out of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
And I think it is interesting story for me too, because my last thought here with this is reflecting on it. It was yeah, like I did struggle as a kid in a lot of ways,
yeah.
and I did have a lot of attitude issues and a lot of anger, and that's kind of the person I was at the time.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it's a powerful story to look back on, and this is probably the main takeaway for me and for our audience here is we all have stories we can look at that we can point to areas that we had deficits in our character, ways that we weren't able to perform well, we didn't rise up, and somewhere along the journey, we can look to stories and moments in our lives that we grew up, we grew out of it, and we overcame that, and we became stronger, and became better character. And I think it's a great example to be able to point to in our lives to kind of give us some strength looking back.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
That's why it's important to look back on stories and how you may have like had a failure or setback and then actually like grown out of it. Cause then you realize like, hey, I am good instead of only just focusing on all the stuff that you're doing bad like now.
right, right.
Yeah.
I know you
Hmm.
probably have an example in your own life, Adam. Um, yeah, just something that you want to share and get into.
Yeah. So, um, right after high school, I wanted to do missionary work through an organization called Net Ministries. Just a kind of a disclaimer, we are not at all like officially affiliated with Net Ministries. Um, so like anything that we say isn't actually reflective of them, just as a disclaimer. But um, anyway, I really wanted to serve with Net. We just call it Net for the people that are around it.
Yep.
And I grew up around this net missionary work because a lot of the missionaries would like stay with families and that kind of thing. And I had a lot of those missionaries staying with me growing up. Both my parents actually did this missionary work, and that's actually how they met. Um, and my older brother also did this missionary work with Net. And I saw how it changed him and how like his character grew through it, and being like, wow, that's really cool. And he did it right after high school. So and being in high school for me was kind of rough. I really didn't like high school. Um, and senior year specifically was like really rough. Like I remember like I was supposed to take the city bus to school, but like senior year, um, I just like could not get up on time in the morning for the life of me. And I think my mother drove me most days.
Yeah.
I was also a little behind because as you could tell, like I didn't have my driver's license senior year. Like I waited a little too long to get that. So I was already kind of coming from like a almost like a place of like being kind of behind um in my senior year and just kind of like being like almost like a little like depressed. Obviously like not diagnosed, but I think my mother did like say like you might be depressed. And I'm like, well maybe, but I don't want to talk to a therapist about it. Um
Yeah.
that's kind of like where I was senior year, but like not wanting school. I was like, oh, I'll go do this missionary thing and then I'll get the same results as my brother and everything will just magically be figured out. And I think that's what I like kind of figured out was. And also because it's like missionary work, it's not like an actual like big job. It's like I just kind of expected like, oh, pretty much everyone gets accepted to this thing. I'll go, I'll see, that's cool. Like they're like nothing's going to really be crazy. I'm just gonna go on this interview weekend where they get to kind of see, is it a right fit for them, right fit for me. And then so I went on this thing and it was good and whatnot, but at a certain point they ask you to like kind of share your story of like how you grew in your faith and or like how you like came closer to God. And we had like some time to write this down. And though I had like gotten closer to God in a lot of different ways, like I just didn't write anything because I'm like, I don't know what story to share because like honestly, up until that point, I don't know if I really even like thought about synthesizing stories about that.
Mm.
Even though I did know of certain times, I just didn't really focus on that just because I was coming from the place of like senior year of being like, I'm shit.
Yeah.
um, and I think that was something that really hampered me. And then after the interview weekend, I ended up getting a letter and then they asked me to wait for not 1, but 2 years. And that was like devastating to me because I'm like, well, what the fuck do I do now? Because like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go to school, but I can't do this thing that I like literally have been wanting to do for a decent amount of high school. And I thought it was going to be like the thing that like basically fixed all my problems in a magical way, which isn't super accurate, but, and it's like, well, what do I do? So I just kind of wandered about and just kind of like enjoyed my summer after senior year doing essentially nothing. But then like my dad gave me a kick in the pants and then I like got a job. But anyway, fast forward to 2 years after that, I was just pushing carts in a Menards parking lot and the recruiter of Net comes up to me and asks me like, hey, you should apply for Net again. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I think, and then I went on the retreat and like the interview retreat weekend, and I like you have to get like reference and stuff, so it took like a little bit, but then I got a call from that same recruiting guy that talked to me in the parking lot. His name is Andy Norton. Shout out Andy.
What a guy. Love that guy.
What a guy. And he's like, yeah, we want you to come on Net. We love you. Like you prayed over people. Like it was crazy. Like all this stuff is like cool and all that things and those things. And I was like ecstatic because I'm like, wow, I succeeded at something. Like this is crazy. And then it was just like super cool to like see like, hey, I was a flaw and then like flawed. And then like after 2 years, I overcame that. And I think a lot of that had to do with me doing like manual labor and
Yeah, I was gonna
working
say
through
like
it.
what do you think
But
changed there? And you just saying manual labor, but yeah,
yeah.
go on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think like because I was just like pushing carts in the Menards parking lot, you don't have to use your brain to push carts in a parking lot. Like you do for like the first like maybe 2 days, and then you can just basically turn your brain off.
Right. Very monotonous.
Very monotonous.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about what you're doing working. However, I think during that time, I think I processed a lot of the stuff that I was going through in high school. Cause like in high school, we're just like really busy all the time or busy trying not to be busy.
Totally.
That we don't really take as much time to like think about like, where's my life at? Where do I want to be? What am I struggling with? Whereas like,
yeah,
that wasn't like my first big failure in life, but it was like, I think it was one of the most devastating failures to me because it's like one of the things that I like thought I was supposed to do.
with getting rejected the first time around.
Yeah, getting rejected the first
Net.
time around.
Yeah.
So like working through that and being like, okay, well, where's my value? And then being like, well, I can do this job well, at least. Like I can push carts in a parking lot and get paid. I think it was like $12 to $13 an hour at that point. It increased over time. But
so it sounds like there was some internal shifts that happened
yes,
through your job.
I think
Is that kind of some of the process there that
yeah, I think a huge part of it was also like I needed to learn how to just work.
right?
And just like be able to grind a little bit. Cause I think in like high school, I like avoided grinding as much as possible. I was like I just procrastinate a lot. I was a really big procrastinator. But then like in doing work, it was like something almost, even though it was like my job and my work, it was something like almost like recreative for me. like recreative.
Yeah.
Like it recreated me in a way, I think. Whereas like I got to look at the world in a different way where it's like, hey, like not everything is just riding on this one thing. There is more to life than just doing missionary work after high school. High school wasn't your whole life. Which I feel like a lot of high schoolers, when they're in high school, they're like, high school is everything. So if I get rejected by this one girl,
Yeah.
my life is over.
It's this bubble that just
Yeah.
blows up, and you're just
Yeah.
you get out of it and you realize, oh, that was just a little
Yeah.
high school thing.
That was a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, dude.
I think that was a huge part of it, but also like even kind of being able to remember like the story of even how our phrase like "stay dangerous" came about through us working with or doing stuff with Knights of the Immaculata. Like that's a story I can share. And I figured out other stuff. The second time we went around, obviously same exercise. You have to write out your story. I wrote
stories you can share.
Yeah.
Doing mission work.
Yeah.
Or
doing mission work. Yep. It's a story that you can like fit into talking to people where like so like why believe in God? Why do this stuff? And I like the second time around, I had more content because like the amount of content that they're looking for is like 3 minutes worth of content. I think I was running for like 8 minutes when I was just talking about stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. So like I like had a lot more content the second time around because I think I had actually had time to reflect on it and grow in it and actually process a lot of that and not be in like the bubble of high school as much. So just being able to like grow up a little bit through doing work helped me a lot. But also like in that time, like I learned to trust God a little bit more too. So I think that was really what the key thing was.
That's wonderful, dude. It just to kind of have some final thoughts here. It's just amazing to me in your story particularly, there's this aspect of going a bit deeper internally and also just like finding a bit more of joy and maybe I could say coming into yourself more, right? Where you're more confident in who you are. You have some more experiences under your belt, doing some work, and even just like with Knights of the Immaculata and some of those aspects from your story that you're able to bring into the mission. And all of a sudden, like the kind of person you are 2 years later, I think they're very confident saying, hey, wait 2 years. It wasn't like, hey, we don't want you. It's like, hey, wait 2 years.
Yeah.
And
like we want you in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's what like I think my parents told me at some point. So I'm like, okay, well that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
At the time I still was like, what the hell?
Yeah. Imagine like if this is totally random, but like what if like when you're in the dating scene and you just have a girl that knows what she wants and she just says to anybody, she says to you, you're like, wait, I want you in 2 years. I'm like, I wonder if the world will be a better place.
I'll see you in a year. And I'm like, okay. And then you come back and then you like actually go on a date with her and you're like, wow, this is everything I'm looking for.
Stay tuned for that aspect of Adam's life. I don't know.
That's how it's gonna happen, guys.
Yeah, that's the story. That's how it's gonna go. Yeah, man. But I don't know if you have any kind of final thoughts here before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just with like the weirdness that high school is and being like that bubble. And I think a lot of the time high schoolers, like they're trying to like find their identity in so many different things the world's telling them to do and like all these other people that are around them that they don't have like time to just think like, who do I actually want to be?
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And I think
that reflection, right?
Yeah, that reflection. I think that was what the main thing was between like right after high school and then 2 years later is I had 2 years of like pushing carts and being able to think while I worked to be like, hey, who do I actually want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? Like, and I think even reflecting on that, and that also like at a certain point I was kind of discontent with the job I was working. I'm like, okay, there's got to be more than just this. Like,
right.
So kind of a little bit more ambition there. So I think that was a lot of what it was. For your story, I think like it was just like a lot of like, I want to be out of this. And I think
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, same thing with my job is like, okay, one can only push carts for so long before being like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah. This is great for
Um,
about 10 minutes, and it's like,
yeah.
okay, moving on.
Yeah. And like I just need to even get up to the point of like realizing, hey, I'm an adult now. And that I think that's what like the first year of pushing carts was.
Right. Yeah, I love it,
Mhm.
man. And just to take us out here, guys, I just once again want to reiterate the power of our stories and being able to just take that time and carve that time out to reflect. As Adam was saying, maybe you feel like there's monotonous aspects to your life, like pushing carts. Utilize that time. Go into yourself. I know a lot of people are afraid to take that self reflection, but if you take that, wait 2 years as a slap in the face. But if you have those situations in your lives for those listening, where maybe that you could compare or relate to Adam's story in a sense of, oh, I need to grow in these things, or my story, it's like, wow, like I get placed into something I don't want to be in because I have a lack of character. I don't have these things.
Mhm.
I'm behind, like in my case with special ed. And I think there's kind of an aspect of like using this to fuel yourself forward. I think that's the message that we really want to communicate is there is hope, there is opportunity, there is purpose, and there's a better you on the other side. And I think we can take the victim mindset and complain, and it's okay to be upset when that first happens, but not to
Mhm.
stay there and to really be like, you know what? If I want to become a dangerous man, there's just going to be aspects I have to grow into my character, whether it be just being more cleanly, having more grit. There's a lot of different topics we
Mhm.
could say, but you're
Actually
going to
figuring out who you are.
actually figuring out who you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we just want to bring that top of mind. And,
Mhm.
and if that's you, we believe in you. Adam and I believe in you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And that's not just like a cheesy tagline. Like I can truly look into myself and be like, I could see how I could grow. And I could
Mhm.
see that for other people that I
Yeah.
meet. And
And no matter who's listening to this, it's like you definitely can grow a lot more. Um, and because I say that because I know it's true for everyone. Everyone can grow more out of whatever situation that they're in, and sometimes it can just take some grit and some reflection,
yeah,
and being able to move into something and do something while also reflecting. And I think that's what really did the trick for me a lot. So
I love that. Thanks for joining us on the Dangerous Man podcast, everybody. Tune in next time. We will see you there. Until then,
stay dangerous.